Hey, Don Williams here with today's episode of the Proven Entrepreneur Show. I have a real treat today. This person, our guest today, I've known maybe 20 years. And so he was probably 5 when we started, or maybe 6. I don't know.
Wasn't that creepy? Yeah.
Maybe not quite that young, but anyhow, we've known each other professionally in other business lives, kind of, certainly for me, less so for him.
Yeah.
But please welcome to the show, Paul Byrne with Rosohio. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Don. Really enjoy it.
Man, it's a thrill to see you on the show. And you reached out maybe a month ago. We went and had lunch, and it was like blast from the past. I mean, because I think it'd probably been 20 years.
It had been a long time. Yeah.
More than a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me this. Let's take you all the way back to little Paul.
Okay.
Well, I think little Paul grew up in Wichita, Kansas. So
That's right.
My Wichita, Kansas brother. Okay.
That's right.
And in your house, the house that you were raised in,
Yeah.
was there an adult who was an entrepreneur?
So in my house, no. My grandfather was an entrepreneur, and he ran a media company that was later purchased by Borg Warner. I think about the time that he retired. And so he did well off of that. My father was actually a rocket scientist, of all things. He worked for Beech Aircraft Missile Systems Division, and he was actually the senior rocket scientist on staff there for a number of years. But so I grew up in kind of what you would call a math-heavy home, and my father ended up working a lot with the military, but he always admired entrepreneurs, and he tried to set up kind of a couple little side things in the technology space, but he never was really a dedicated entrepreneur. Certainly never made his living off of it. My mother did open a fabric store at one point, but it was more of a hobby that she did with her friends than really a business. So not so maybe a little bit, a touch of that in the home, but not directly.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And so many times, an entrepreneur has a side hustle. They have a hobby that they kind of turn into a side hustle. And, years later or weeks later, it kind of depends on the deal. But, it blossoms into one of those businesses where it takes all your time and all your effort.
Yeah, I've met a lot of those people. Yeah.
And hopefully pays you off one day. Okay. So still with little Paul, okay, it's like 5 to 18.
Mm-hmm.
What was your first paying job? What's the first thing you do where you traded time and effort for money?
I guess I would define that as my paper routes that I had when I was early teens, 12, 13 years old. And I had a really bad habit of signing up to become for a route. And it was more about when they became available. But I would sign up, in October and then go through the entire winter, which, in Kansas was often brutal, in Wichita. And then because it was so windy and cold, and then I would, my poor father, some mornings I'd get him up at 5 o'clock and it was, sleeting outside and he'd have to drive me because my first route was like a mile away. And then the next year, I think I got the one in my neighborhood, but I'd quit in the springtime, and my parents were just like, "What are you doing? Like, this is the time to sign up. You got this backwards," and they were right. But that was my first thing. So it wasn't really a job; it was kind of an entrepreneurial thing because I had to, I sold papers, I collected money, I delivered, that was really kind of the first thing.
And I don't even think that exists anymore.
I can't imagine. Back then everybody got the newspaper.
Yeah.
So I would deliver 200 papers, and my first space was an apartment complex, and I had like 4 or 5 buildings, and that was it. Everybody got the paper, so it was pretty easy. And then when I had my neighborhood, which was more just like a single family home type neighborhood, the lots were bigger, but still it was pretty compressed. To do it now, I don't know anybody in my neighborhood that gets the paper on a regular basis. You'd have 10 miles between subscribers. I don't know. It'd be really rare.
Yeah, I think the distance, and I just think the security, the safety concern
Of a young person doing that.
of children.
Yeah.
I remember I was never a paper boy, I
Yeah.
think is what we called them, but I had
Yeah.
friends that were, and
Yeah.
man, I want to say like at maybe age 10 or 12, they were throwing papers and up at the crack of dawn and throwing papers in the middle of the night, folding papers, banding
Yeah.
papers, tossing papers, collecting money. Today that just couldn't happen. But
Sunday morning was a beating because those papers were 20 pounds each. And, I could only load a few. And I was doing this on my bike. But on Sunday morning, I'd get a wagon and pull that behind me and load that up with paper. And still, I had to return like 3 or 4 times. It was just all those dang coupons. It was horrible.
yeah. But there was a recent, maybe published this week in Forbes, that it talked about the relationship between childhood chores and adult success, and and there maybe is something to youngsters having, and a paper route is certainly more than chores.
Right.
That's a job, but
Yeah.
certainly some relationship there. So,
Yeah.
okay, well, after school, so you're 17, 18, 19 years old, and
Right.
then I think you hiked the Andes in Peru, or
No, nothing like that.
you didn't. Okay, so what
No.
was you went to college, you went to university, you joined the Merchant Marines. What did you do?
Yeah, so I should go back to because there's probably another interesting story in there of my young. So, like you, I listened to one of your podcasts where you talked about working the wheat harvest, or at least driving a combine or something.
Yeah,
when you were very young, by the way.
very young.
Yeah,
OSHA would not approve.
yeah. Well, I was 13, 14 years old, and I worked I harvest on a wheat farm in Kansas, and I was driving a pickup truck, and and working a wheat scoop, which was really really tough work. But so I became a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when I was 16 years old. And there was a gentleman in the church out of Utah that had this program where he would provide labor to the pineapple plantations in Hawaii. And he would get all these kids together, hundreds of us. And we worked, I was in I lived on kind of like a compound that there were probably, in my compound, there's probably like 120 to 150, teenage boys. And we have, like, we all lived in one room, barrack style, with a leader who was maybe a few years older than us, who was kind of, responsible for the group. And we were the crew, and every day we worked together, and we went to the beach together in the afternoons and all of that. And so that was probably one of my most formative experiences, was that summer that I spent in Hawaii, on Maui, near Lahaina, on the pineapple plantation. And it was kind of it was one of those things that made me realize, like, I do not want to do this for the rest of my life. At the same time, it was such a great summer. Yeah, it's such a fantastic. Now, the program's gone. It was, I think it went on for like 20 years or so.
Wow.
And it was really interesting. But there were kind of two kinds of boys that went there. So there were ones like me that were, good, clean cut kids. I had cleaned up my act when I joined the church, but so I hadn't always been that way. But there were other ones that were sent by judge's order. And it was either that or juvie, and so it was really kind of an interesting mix of kids. And that was just a fantastic experience. So, as a member of that church, I went when I was 19 to serve a mission, and I ended up going to Italy. But the year before my mission, I had graduated from high school, and I went to the University of Missouri in Rolla, and I was studying electrical engineering. And for whatever reason, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I went home the 8 months before I left on my mission, and I started selling computers in a computer shop to mostly engineers and accountants. Because that's, talking 1980, what, 3?
That's who
84.
bought it.
Yeah. Yeah. The first Macintosh came out when I had that job, and I was selling Hewlett Packard computers, opposite brand. It was kind of a disaster for us from the personal computer side of things. But but when I got back from my mission, I probably made the worst mistake of my life, and I did not go back to engineering school. I decided that I was going to I wanted to get the degree that was quickest for me to get, because I knew I wanted to go get an MBA. And so I decided to get a degree in Italian, because when I came back from my mission, I spoke fluent Italian. I had studied, the grammar and everything. So it was easy. I could quiz out of everything. I quizzed out of, 20 hours of class. I already had tons of time as an engineer. So I already had all my math and science out of the way. So all I really did, so I ended up, at Brigham Young University for a couple of years studying Italian literature. And then I worked in sales, tech sales for about a year, and then went to Sdabolconi, which is in Milan, Italy. So, and by the way, the most important thing happened to me during this time, which was I got married. And my wife's from Italy, so she was a kind of deciding factor to go to graduate school in Europe. And she was from the south of Italy. I went to school in Milan, but what a great time. I mean, we were just in abject poverty, living in this illegally built apartment in Milan that was really cold in the winter. With we had a newborn baby when we moved in there, and it was crazy. But that's kind of how I got involved in business, and I got hired out of there, and I worked for a German company. At the time, the borders were going down around Europe, and so before that time, you drove from Italy to France, and you had to go through customs and all of that. And then by 1993, so a year after I graduated, January of 1993, the borders went down. And so I was helping this German company take its importers in other countries and either acquire them or prepare them for, the common market. This was before the euro, by the way. And so that was a really interesting job. And I did that for 3 years. I started in Germany, spent a year kind of traveling around Europe, helping companies. And then I spent a couple of years in France. But after that, I came back to the US, and I was recruited by PepsiCo to work at Pizza Hut. It's hometown Wichita, right back, and the headquarters was still there. And then
owned by the Carneys then, or PepsiCo had bought it.
Yeah, PepsiCo had long since purchased it. Although Brian Carney, one of the Carney's sons, was actually in a band that I was in when I was in high school. It had nothing to do with me getting a job at Pizza Hut, but yeah, I knew the Carneys. And we decided, oh well, we're settling down in Wichita. I kind of moved home, right? And and we decided to have our third child. By that time, I had a daughter that was born when we were living in France, and then we came back, and within a few months, we were expecting another child, our third, and Pizza Hut said, "Hey, we're moving to Dallas," and I'm like, the time you're scheduling me to move is about a week before my wife's due date. And so they were kind and let me finish out. I was the only person in the building that I knew of. in Wichita, at least in my section of the building. And I was able to work there, email, phone, etc. And then 3 weeks later, we moved down. So
amazing. Okay,
yeah,
I want to make a couple comments.
yeah,
So first off, the pineapple plantation thing, I'm just saying, it beat driving a tractor in Sumner County, Kansas at wheat harvest, which is what I was doing at that time, where it was
yeah,
105. Um, and if you're not familiar with Kansas,
yeah,
they don't even talk about it being breezy until it's about 20-mile-an-hour wind. And
yeah,
it's not windy until it's about 40-mile-an-hour wind, and the
yeah,
wind's always blowing. And
yes,
so in the summer, it's kind of like a hairdryer.
yeah. Lots of
Um,
women with short hair in Kansas. That was
yeah,
the style.
very much so. And I was just there last week, and
Yeah,
we were in western Kansas, and the people I were with, they were asking the guide, we were on a hunting trip, and they were saying, so what's the wind going to be like tomorrow? And he's like, we don't check the wind. This is western Kansas. It will be windy. And you're like,
yeah.
well, yeah.
It's just no doubt. Yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be windy. And then mission trip to Italy.
yeah.
Okay, somehow you're living right or something, because that's not the rainforest in the Amazon.
Well, they don't tell you, like, you just apply to go on a mission.
Yeah.
And then they send you a letter back, and here's where you're going. And my daughter went to Brazil, but yeah, I went to Italy, and it was southern Italy at the time. My parents were quite concerned because my mission headquarters was in Sicily. There were other missions in Italy, but mine was in Sicily, in Catania, and it was a time of the big mafia trials, and when Giovanni Falcone was killed while I was on my mission. We were threatened by Muammar Gaddafi that he was going to bomb Sicily because the Americans were launching aircraft from Sigonella against Libya, which is just right outside of Catania. And then like, I had been there just a few weeks, and I was actually in kind of the part of Italy that's sort of the heel of the boot in Bari, and they an anarchist communist terrorist bombed the Bologna train station, which was like the main hub, for train traffic in Italy. And all that happened while I was there, but I was just oblivious to it. I was just walking around trying to talk to people about Christ, and all this stuff's going on around me. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, absolutely. My favorite city on earth is Florence.
Oh,
And,
beautiful.
and, if I could be in Italy today, I would. It's just one of those places. Okay.
Yeah,
So
beautiful.
that kind of brings us to, and interesting about the engineer thing. So you probably know this, but 40% of the world's entrepreneurial billionaires,
Mm-hmm.
not inherited billionaires, but entrepreneurial billionaires,
Right.
40% have an engineering background.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just kind of a different level of thinking, and then I have some friends that are physicists, and that's kind of a whole nother,
Yeah.
like for what your dad did, he was probably as strong in physics as he was in engineering, and that's kind of a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
level
Yeah.
on its own. So
Yeah.
so awesome. So tell me, so now you got to Dallas, you followed
Right.
Pizza Hut. Okay. They were up there in North Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And, and my aunt dated, I don't remember if it was Frank or the other brother.
Oh, one of the Carnies. Yeah.
Yeah. But dated one of the,
Right. Yeah.
Pizza Hut was founded by two brothers in a
Yeah.
little bitty, I don't know, 10 by 15, 10 by 20 space on East Douglas, I think, in Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah. They moved that building to the Wichita State University campus.
Well, it's
Yeah.
certainly a big piece of entrepreneurial history.
Yeah.
These two guys started a little pizza place. They sold pretty good pizza. It grew
Mm-hmm.
like wildfire. And I think when they sold to PepsiCo in the 80s, if I'm right, maybe the early 80s, I think they sold for 300 million, which would be a entirely different number today.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
that would be in the billions for sure.
Oh,
So,
yeah. I think Jimmy John's sold for 1.6 billion, something like that. Or yeah. Or no, Jersey Mike's sandwich
Jersey
shop.
Mike's.
Yeah, sold for 1.6 billion, and certainly Pizza Hut was a much bigger brand and organization than they were. So yeah, it would have been multiple billions.
And I'll just say this, as a kid, I can remember going into a Pizza Hut restaurant, hut to the Pizza Hut, going into a Pizza Hut restaurant, sitting down, ordering a pizza like you would in any sit down
Yeah,
restaurant, which of course I don't think anybody does that anymore.
yeah.
They would deliver this pizza to your table. It would be so hot it would burn the skin off of the roof of your mouth every time,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
people just flocked to it because it was just excellent product.
Yeah,
And there's certainly an entrepreneurial lesson in there, is you can burn the roofs of their mouth every time if you serve an excellent product. That's just how it goes. Okay,
yeah,
so you got to Dallas. You're working for PepsiCo.
yeah.
Okay, you've had kids all over the world. You married your wife
Oh, easy.
from
One wife. Yeah,
one wife in Italy, but kids from everywhere.
yeah,
Okay, Italy, France, U.S.
yeah.
Okay, you're in Dallas. At some point, you start Rosohio. When is that?
Yeah. So I feel like my entrepreneurial story is somewhere between inspirational and maybe a cautionary tale. I do not recommend this, but as a career move, but I rage quit my job one day. I was the CMO of a direct sales company, and that had, revenues of, I don't really know exactly because it was a privately held company and I wasn't involved in all the businesses, but it had to be, at least $1 billion. And I ended up just getting really, really frustrated with that job because of a number of things going on and kind of the change in my role, et cetera. And so one day I just was in a meeting. The meeting was going not so well for me personally, and I was just kind of tired of it. And so I just hung up from the call. It was an online meeting, and I sent my boss an email and just said, "I'm done." And I got up and left. Which, and I was completely sober. Like, I don't drink or anything, like this happened, I think it was maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon or something when this was going on. And I remember that we had a visitor from the California office in our Dallas office, and that I had given a ride from the airport to the office. So I gave her a ride back to the airport. And so that gave me about, 40 minutes to figure out what the hell I was going to tell my wife. Right. Um, and, uh, and so, yeah, she was not thrilled, but kind of, I think, just bit her lip and said, "No, can you get this job back?" And I'm like, I don't think so. Yeah, I think it's done. I think the way I quit, this is probably it. So, and I was right. And my boss, who I was good friends with, I kind of said, I really think you take this opportunity to kind of change things up. You've been talking about doing your own business for a while. Maybe this is the time. And was generous. He extended my, healthcare benefits for a couple months and so forth, because I did, help them with a few things afterward. Things calmed down, right? In fact, they became my first client, but I ended up, not knowing what I was going to do. I had a friend who I was actually also a client of his, who had this business doing data entry for sales organizations. So they did it for our organization. They would take all of the receipts that were generated in the field, sales, door-to-door sales, direct sales, and they would put them in a database for us, and then we use them for a variety of purposes. But he had some other clients, and he offered to let me join that business, and I did. And so technically, that company was called Aid Data, and we had dozens and dozens of women who were working from home, and they would come pick up these tubs full of paper and take them home, do their data entry, after the kids went to bed or whatever, and then email us back spreadsheets. It was really, really inefficient. And we eventually got to the point where we were doing that. We had built some software for them to do it online, et cetera. And it was much, much faster. But through that process, we started selling the products of my old company online to the people on the receipts, because they were not using the receipts to sell things. So initially we did it with email, and then that company said, hey, you guys are doing a pretty good job with these email sales. Can you can you rebuild our website? Because we don't like, the guy who's running our website right now. We don't really like it. Can you do something with that? And so I said, sure. I had no idea what I was going to do. I wasn't really technical at all at that point.
Oh,
And
hey, I got to stop you there.
yeah,
Moral to the story, people. When somebody asks to buy something from you, the answer's always yes.
yes,
Okay. And then figure out how to deliver that. And literally,
yeah,
millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of business have been done because somebody said, yes, they didn't tell them they were going to figure it out. They said yes. And then they
yeah,
figured it out
yeah,
and they built a business. Okay. I'm
yeah,
sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt,
yeah.
but
And
that
I think they had enough trust in me overall that, despite the way that I quit the company, that they knew that I wasn't going to commit to something that I couldn't do. And so I just spent, 3 weeks, night and day, figuring this out. And I ended up using this software that was owned by eBay. It was called Pro Stores, and it was kind of like a Shopify before there was a Shopify, where you could build this online store and and sell things online and do it on your own. It was a self-service thing, just almost like selling on eBay, right? A little bit more than that, but essentially that was the case. I built that website and started selling the product online, and within a few months we were the largest merchant in Texas on their system. And and we weren't that big, maybe $1 million a year or something like that if you looked at the run rate. And we but they invited me to attend this event that they were doing in Dallas with eBay. The people at Pro Stores did, because they were going to be there as well. And they invited me out to dinner, and they asked me like, hey, what can we improve, et cetera. And I was like, you want the list? Here you go. And after about an hour, they stopped me, and the guy says, look, Paul, you seem to know a lot about like this and how this should work, et cetera. I have a group that's doing my pre-sales support that I'm thinking of changing. Could you set up a team to do this? And again, the answer was yes. Right? I actually said, you know what? Like, I think so. Let me get back to you, because I did go back and talk to my business partner about it. And we had, and he was fine. Like he wasn't that much help with it. We had sort of started dividing up the business between the data entry side and the e-commerce side. And I was doing, the e-commerce stuff. And so within 6 months, we signed the contract, I think on Christmas Eve with eBay, and I was supposed to be up and running 1st of January. And so like I found an office, I put in a phone system, we connected it to theirs, everything. And I hired Jason, who's now my business partner at that time, because he had experience in both selling online on Pro Stores, and he had experience in Salesforce, because that was one of the tools that they used. In fact, at the time, he was like a Salesforce admin. So this would have been 2011. And so January 1st, 2011, that contract started. And that's how I really got into e-commerce and e-commerce consulting. And once again, they came to us with more opportunities, because one thing I found out about large corporations is, like, once you're in as a contractor, it takes a long time to get that first contract, right? But once you're a recognized vendor, it's much easier for them to come to you than anybody else outside. And so they just kept throwing stuff at us. We ran this merchant council that involved the CEO of eBay and these massive online meetings, just where we had to recruit attendees and we would practice it, and we had like multiple backups for the transmission, and we were working with the folks out of San Jose, and just really kind of started doing things like that for them, and that was kind of how we got into that was how I got into e-commerce. But during that time, I kind of got the bug, like I started as an engineer. I had written a little bit of code. My son was getting into it. And I hired him and some other folks, and we started helping merchant with eBay's permission. We were allowed to kind of in a separate business, help these merchants like either move from one platform to another. They had just acquired Magento, so they were trying to get all these people onto Magento. And so we started developing on Magento and customizing Magento stores. And that was it. And I discovered my son, who had a degree in radio, television, and film at that point. He had just graduated. But during the time he was in college, he discovered that he didn't really like that much. And he wanted to learn programming, and he did. And he ran these automated online stores where he would connect vendors to eBay, and it would literally like manage his inventory, manage his feed, manage his postings, everything. And he had written the software for that. And then he started getting into Magento development when we asked him to, and eBay started bringing us leads because people would kind of get too big for Pro Stores or for Magento Go, which was Magento's online version, and they would need something more customizable. And so we did, we started doing that kind of development, and that, and I started hiring software engineers, and eventually it spread to what Rosohio has become today.
Amazing. So tell me, so I mean, it sounds to me like there's been a series of yes.
Yeah.
And I'll go figure it out. Okay. Yeah. In your career. And I can't emphasize that enough. This show is about entrepreneurs learning from other entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And that is a huge win to be able to swallow your fear and just say yes. You can always say no tomorrow if you have to. Okay. Right. Try not to. So tell me this. I want to ask you a couple questions, and we're kind of in the fourth turn here. I can see the finish line up there ahead of us.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about a hard lesson. So something in your business that when it happened is like, oh man, that is painful. But maybe today, with a little distance and a little perspective, it turns out it was a very good thing. And certainly the rage quit from your employer probably qualifies. but do you have another one?
That was my fault. Oh, I've got plenty. I would say the one that comes to mind that was probably the most impactful on our future was we were pretty much dedicated Magento developers. And that was all we did, was we customized Magento stores. And as technology evolved, security evolved, hacking evolved, they needed to upgrade from this Magento 1, which was built in a very specific framework, to Magento 2. And there was a lot of changes being made. And unfortunately, at that same time, eBay was selling off Magento. In fact, they sold it to Adobe. It's now Magento, what they used to call Magento Enterprise is now Adobe Commerce. And it was really tough because we were working with a lot of companies and doing all of this like development customization work, but they're like, well, when Magento 2 comes out, it has this feature, that feature. We really want to kind of pause until Magento 2 comes out. And unfortunately, both the acquisition folks and the Adobe folks, they kept kicking the can down the road. And so our clients kept pushing off their projects, and the well almost ran completely dry. We were down to really just maintenance work at that point. and that was our only real source of income. And so it was, that was tough. That was tough. At the time, I probably had, 12 people on staff and mouths to feed. And I mean, you know what that's like.
Yeah.
So, fortunately, we never missed payroll. I missed payroll personally more than once, but as a company, my employees never did. And we said we got to branch out, and so we branched out and started working on other platforms and started doing different kinds of software development. And that really forced us to go from kind of imitators of things that other people were doing to innovators, where now, we build fully custom systems and we work with clients to figure out what they want them to do. So it, it forced that change. It was tough at the time. The company, we lost money for a year or two, but now we're much better off for it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Imitators to innovators.
Right.
That's a great lesson there, and one that many entrepreneurs have learned who either had one product or
Hmm.
one client or one delivery model,
Yeah.
and found out, hey, if something happens there, uh,
Right.
the step from 1 to 0 is just one step, and
Yeah.
and that can be scary. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. Okay, so um, next question: if your mind was an open book, and I said, hey, in this career, you've learned many, many wise things, but there's a couple nuggets that you hold near and dear to your heart. Okay. Do you have a nugget you could share with us?
So you mean learned as an entrepreneur?
It doesn't matter if it's helped your entrepreneurial career. It doesn't matter where it came from. And certainly the one that you've shared with us several times today is
Right.
Paul says yes, even if he doesn't know how to do it. Paul says yes. And I love that. Um,
Yeah.
do you have another?
Yeah. So I would say the most important realization that I came to was that your family, and I would say, especially your spouse, if you're married, is the person that is going to be with you, for the rest of your life. This business, at some point, it could go away. And I, as I saw kind of the waves of technology crashing on us, right? We could have easily been sunken by one of those. But I still have my family, right? And so you really need to figure out how you're going to focus on them and put that business in, second place, third place. Um, you can still be great at it. You can still be excellent. You can still spend, the time you need on it, but they need to know that they're number one, because they are, in the end, they really are. And I love my business. I love my employees. I love what I do, and the work that I do, etc. But I realize that it, if it all went away tomorrow, which it could, every entrepreneur knows, right? uh, that yeah, that really, I've spent my life, building my family and the relationships that count there, and not just building a money making machine. So
I love that. And so, most of my clients in my consulting practice are entrepreneurs. They come to me and they're wanting to build their business.
mm,
And we help them by ringing the cash register faster and larger. And
right.
that doesn't solve all their problems, but it does solve maybe half of their problems.
Yeah, some revenue problems. Yeah.
And so they're focused on business. And then, just in interacting with people, then
Mhm.
there's their family and then there's them.
Right.
Okay. And one of the mind shifts I try and help people with is, let's turn that upside down to where you are the top. And that's really hard for a female, for mother entrepreneurs, because they're always putting their family first. And many fathers too,
Yeah.
but it's I mean, it's just cliche
Yeah.
with mothers. And my theory is this: I get it. And I was a single dad for a long time, and my kids lived with me. And so I was a great dad and not a very good mom, but I'm what they had.
Yeah.
Okay. But I know this, that if you're empty, you cannot fill them.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
take care of you,
Yep.
take care of your family, take care of your business. But if you take care of the top two, business is a lot more about who you are than what you
Right.
do. It's the being, not the doing, you know?
Yeah.
And people say, I want to grow my business. I'm like, well, you have to be better. Not
Yeah.
necessarily do better. You got to be better.
Yeah.
And then the more will happen almost
Yeah.
automatically without effort. So,
Well, there's one piece of advice I give to everybody, which is never take advice, including mine.
yeah, good point.
That people come, when you're an entrepreneur and you have some degree of success, like I'm not a billionaire or anything, right? But you have some degree of success, people come looking to you looking for lessons. And I just say, like, don't rage quit your job. Like, don't do any of the things I did. Don't take my advice. Figure it out on your own, and you'll be happy, right?
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in people can learn if you share your story.
Yeah, I agree.
And you will find the similarities and the things you can learn from, which is different than you should, you ought to,
Yeah,
that's advice.
and I've really plucked some nuggets from some of the. I listened to some of the past episodes of your podcast, and there's some guys in there whose situations may have been different from mine, but they just make me think. Right? They stop. You think. You reflect. You get a new insight. Right? And I think that's the message. The story is the message. Right?
Story is the message.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Hardest question I'm going to ask you, Paul.
Oh boy.
Okay. I'm going to put you in a time machine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to send you all the way back to 20-year-old Paul.
Yeah.
You're going to get about 60 seconds to share a piece of advice to your younger self that would have been helpful to know. You know it now, but it would have been helpful if you'd known it then.
Yeah.
Okay. And your kids will one day listen to this and they'll be like, oh, that for dad. So into the time machine you go, all the way back. Here's 20-year-old Paul.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I probably would try to encourage myself to finish the degree in engineering. And
Okay.
I could still get an MBA. I would have spent an extra year in college to finish that out, as opposed to the way I did it. But I really wish I'd done that. And I kind of ended up over my life making up for it by studying, become acquiring technical knowledge through my own independent study on the subject. So, but that degree would have been a very helpful foundation at many points in my career.
And the interesting thing, because I spend all my professional life with entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Okay. I know so many engineers, physicians, dentists,
Yeah.
accountants, people that would be very STEM oriented,
Yeah.
that maybe they were in that career for 10 or 20 years, but now they're not.
Yeah.
And even physicians and even dentists and even lawyers who kind of have this inside joke about, I'm a recovering physician, I'm a recovering dentist, I'm a recovering attorney. And the training and the way that they learn to think in those disciplines has proven to be invaluable in their entrepreneurial lives.
Right. And I when I was 20, I saw that as, I'm studying the thing that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And at that point, I wanted to be involved in international business. And what you really need to do is figure out, well, how do I become, I think Einstein said it, focus on becoming useful, and then you will become important.
Mm.
And I think I would have been a lot more useful if I had a degree in engineering. But, because I really don't use my Italian, my knowledge of Dante's Inferno or, the Divine Comedy doesn't really play much in my business life.
Yeah. The Divine Comedy. I can remember touring Florence, and the
Oh
guy
yeah,
told me something about Dante, and I'm like,
Dante's City.
it was comedy, right? And he's like, well, it's called The Divine Comedy. I was like, okay, yeah, all right. So,
Yeah,
Paul,
yeah.
how would a listener, a viewer of the Proven Entrepreneur Show, how would they reach you or Rosohio if there was a professional interest?
Absolutely. So just go to rozoyo.com. It's RAZOYO.com and hit contact if you want to contact the company. If you want to contact me directly, go to LinkedIn. It's /PW Byrne. Just look me up. I'm easy to find. And just reach out to me there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and if somebody interesting asks to connect with me on LinkedIn, I will definitely connect to them and at least see what they're about. So, give that a shot. Otherwise, contact me through rosohio.com.
Yeah. So go to the website or look up Paul on LinkedIn, and I can testify he's very active on LinkedIn.
maybe a little too active.
He's very active on LinkedIn, and but as all of us who are B2B should be,
Yeah, I
LinkedIn is
agree.
not to be ignored or avoided if you're
Right.
B2B
Right.
for certain. So, Paul, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Don. It's a pleasure. I look forward to our next encounter, whatever that is.
Yeah, me too. Folks, that's today's episode of the Proven Entrepreneur Show. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.